Well, hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Mustard Seed Leadership Podcast. We are on a journey studying the legendary leadership of James. Just an amazing leader. Over the last couple of weeks, we looked at how he led with humility, he led with courage, he led with truth, he led with action. And part 5, the one I want to focus on today, might take you by surprise slightly. James was a leader who led with an understanding of the price of leadership. What do I mean by that? Well, the verse I want to focus on comes from chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. James 3, verses 1 and 2. It says, "Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly, and we all stumble in many ways." Quite an interesting verse, isn't it? But to be honest, I've always pondered that verse. You will be judged more strictly. And I'm always left wondering, well, judged by who? 3 options. Option number 1 is it's God who judges those who teach more strictly. In this case, we as teachers need an even greater sense of the fear of God. Does God himself hold teachers and preachers to an even higher standard? Very possibly. We know he's perfect and his judgments are just, but maybe he's watching over those who preach and teach and lead his people and judge even more strictly. That puts the fear of God inside of me. But number 2, option 2 is the very people that we're leading will judge us by a higher standard. And once again, they have every right to do that, because if you're standing in front, there's an expectation that we practice what we preach. And the people we lead would expect that as leaders, we're not being phony or flaky, but are actually doing what we speak about. The third option is the world. And we see that all the time. There is this perception, once again, rightly so, that if you're a church leader, preacher, a teacher, that we should be practicing what we preach. And the world is very quick to criticize and then publicize scandal after scandal as preachers and teachers come crashing down. But the point is simply this. Maybe it's all 3. But behind that is the big idea I want us to get hold of this episode. There is a price. There's a price to be a leader in the kingdom of God. A silly little story, I've used it before, but I remember years ago, Monday's my day off, and Monday I'm normally exhausted from a busy Sunday. I am normally a little bit grumpy. That goes with it. One of my chores is to do the grocery shopping on Monday. And I remember this particular Monday in our local grocery store, and I was waiting in line and everything was slow and the specials were missed and it was complicated and I was getting more and more frustrated. This is my day off. I don't want to be standing in a grocery store. Eventually, I get my turn and I'm trying to pay, and then the lady misses the special and charges me twice for this, then has to call the supervisor, and the temperature inside of me is rising. And by the time I finally pay, I'm grabbing my shopping bags, I'm miffed, I'm walking out, and the cashier lady smiles at me and says, "Goodbye, Pastor, I'll see you on Sunday." And I'm like, oh dear God, I thought I'd never seen her in my life. And yet she knew me as pastor, had come to our church, and was of course looking at the way I conducted myself, which in this case wasn't good. Point is this, there's no day off for a leader. As leaders in the kingdom of God, there's a price that we have to understand, and how do we live accordingly. So part of the price of leadership is letting go of some of the privileges, and I'm going to use that word interesting, privileges of a non-leader. For example, there are no days off from good character, never. We don't get to be moody. People expect the leaders to always be full of joy and passion. You don't get to have a good day, bad day. You're moody now, you're not moody now. No. People have an expectation that leaders will be full of joy and enthusiasm. We don't get to focus on ourselves. What do I mean by that? Well, the people in the church are not really interested in you and your problems. They want you to be interested and listen to theirs. So you can't be that leader who's unloading to everyone, even if you're going through a tough time. We don't get to be weak and needy. People need their leaders to be strong and full of faith. So you don't get to always be needy. No. Strong in the Lord and His mighty power. Does that mean that leaders are immune from bad days, struggles, and weakness? Of course not. But part of the price of leadership is recognizing that people have an expectation of leaders. We're held to a higher standard, and we need to draw strength from God and deal with our stuff so that we can minister and encourage the people around us. Let me give you a couple of examples. King David, of course, is amazing. And I'll give you 3 quickly. Number 1, paying the price of strength. 1 Samuel 30 verse 6. It's a famous example where David was greatly distressed because the men were talking of stoning him. Each one was bitter in spirit because of his sons and daughters, but David found strength in the Lord his God. Despite his own personal loss, he's lost his family, lost his house, lost everything. His men were turning against him, and yet price of leadership, he had to be the one to find strength in God God to encourage his people and go and lead the battle and restore everything. Do leaders need encouragement and support from friends? Of course they do. But the way we lead ourselves and stay strong in the Lord is part of our leadership journey. Secondly, paying the price of sin. Remember Bathsheba and how everything went wrong? In 2 Samuel 12, verses 12 and 13, you did it in secret. This is Nathan the prophet who came to him. But I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel. That is scary. What David did in secret, God says, now I'm going to broadcast before all Israel. Then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan replied, the Lord has taken away your sin. You're not going to die, but there were consequences. The nation suffered because of David's sin. His private sin had major public consequences. As leaders who carry authority, the consequences of sin impact not just ourselves, but the very people that we lead. Will leaders sin? Of course. But the way we overcome temptation and deal with personal sin is a part of the price of leadership because the consequences are higher. And then thirdly, paying the price of suffering. Remember Absalom, his very own son, whom he loved so much, turned against him. There was a whole scandal, and eventually his son was killed. And in 2 Samuel 19, verses 6 and 7, Joab, leader of the army, comes to David and says, you love those who hate you and hate those who love you. You have made it clear today that the commanders and their men mean nothing to you. I see that you would be pleased if Absalom were alive today and all of us were dead. Now, go out and encourage your men. I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a man will be left with you by nightfall. This will be worse for you than all of the calamities that have come on you from your youth until now. In other words, he had to deal with his own personal sense of loss so that he could go encourage and show gratitude towards the soldiers. Does that mean a leader is immune to suffering? No, of course. Leaders have to show pain and will show pain, but the way we walk through our suffering needs to be an example for the very people that we're leading. So what's the big idea? Leadership has a price tag. It is a huge privilege to co-labor with Jesus, shepherding his people, and there's an eternal reward that will come to you. But while we're here now, there's a price to pay. And so the leadership challenge is to keep the privilege of leadership higher than the price of leadership. Normally what you focus on most grows. So if we find ourselves focusing always on the price, that's what seems to grow. If you focus on the privilege, that's what grows. Leader, what are you focusing on? The price or the privilege? These three questions may help you do a little bit of introspection. Number one, what does the price of leadership look like for you? Number two, is the privilege of leadership greater than the price of leadership for you? If not, then you're in dangerous territory. And then number three, what can you do better to be paying the price of leadership without being distracted by it? What areas of your life might need to grow and improve? I hope this helps. This is a very real lesson. I've learned a lot from James once again. Leaders, there is a price, but what a privilege. Let's pay it for the glory of his name. Hope it helps. Can't wait to see you again next week. God bless, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Remember, if you'd like the notes that come along with this episode or any one of our past episodes, you can visit outlookchurch.co.za/mustardseed leadership, where you can see all our past episodes, all the resources and notes that go along with this. Until next time, keep growing.